Welcome back to Friendly Fire. Blessed are the curious. Last episode, I told you I was tired. I recorded it anyway because that's kind of the point to this whole show. I don't wait until we have it all together. We just kind of show up and tell the truth. It's been a little over a week, and something about that episode hit different for a lot of people because I think a lot of us are sitting in the same exhaustion, the same confusion, the same sense that the machine is running us and we don't even know how to get off of it. Episode 3 was about peacemaking and about refusing to be sorted by the algorithm and the tribe and the outrage cycle, about being called children of God instead of children of whatever political coalition needs you most right now. But I left something hanging at the end of that episode. I said peacemaking means that you insist on seeing the human being behind the label, the wounded man on the road underneath the political jersey. And some of you heard that and you thought, okay, what does that actually look like? In my real life, what do I do on my actual road? Well, Jesus answered that question, not with a sermon, but with a story. Luke 10, the Good Samaritan. You've heard it probably all your life. You think you know it, but you just might not know it the way Jesus told it. So let's get into it. Welcome in. All right, here's the setup. Luke 10:25. A lawyer, and in the first century, that means an expert in religious law, a theologian, someone who knows the text inside and out. He stands up and he asks Jesus a question. Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Now, Luke tells us something real important here. He says the lawyer asked this to test Jesus. This isn't a sincere inquiry. This is a trap. He wants to see how Jesus handles the law. So Jesus does what Jesus always does. He answers the question with another question. What does the law say? How do you read it? And the lawyer nails it. Love God with everything you've got and love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus says, you've got it. Do that and you'll live. But here's where it gets interesting. The lawyer doesn't walk away satisfied. Luke says that he wanted to justify himself. So he asks a follow-up question. And who is my neighbor? That question sounds innocent, but it's not. It's a boundary question. It's a jurisdiction question. It's the question of someone trying to locate the edge of their obligation. Who counts? Who do I have to love? Where does my responsibility end? And Jesus doesn't answer that question directly. He tells a story because Jesus knows that the lawyer doesn't need a definition. He needs a mirror. All right, so here we go. A man is traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho. That road was real. It was about 17 miles long, and it descended a little over 3,000 feet through the rocky desert terrain. It was notorious. People called it the Way of Blood because of how dangerous that it was. Bandits, they worked it regularly. The man that's walking down this road, he gets robbed, beaten, left for dead on the side of the road, and 2 people pass him. A priest first, then a Levite. Both of them, they're religious leaders. Both people whose entire vocation was oriented around the love of God and the love of neighbor. Both crossed to the opposite side of the road to keep moving. Now, before we pile on the priest and the Levite, let's be fair to them for just a second. There were legitimate reasons in their religious framework for not touching what would appear to be a corpse. Ritual purity laws, and they were serious. Touching a dead body would have made them ceremonially unclean and unable to perform their religious duties, their job. So they had a reason, a religious reason, a theologically defensible reason. And Jesus says to them, and then a Samaritan came. That's where the story kind of turns right here. And if you're a first century Jewish listener, that's where your stomach just drops. All right, so here's where I need to slow down just a little bit because this is what gets domesticated the most. We've turned Good Samaritan into a synonym for a helpful stranger. There are Good Samaritan laws, there are Good Samaritan hospitals. The phrase has been completely defanged. But in the mouth of Jesus talking to a first century Jewish audience, a Samaritan was not a neutral stranger. Here's the simple part first. Samaritans and Jews had centuries of mutual hostility. When the Assyrians conquered the northern kingdom of Israel around like 722 BC, they resettled the land with foreigners who intermarried with the remaining Israelites. The Samaritans were the descendants of that mixed population. Jews considered them racially and religiously compromised. They had their own version of the Torah. They had their own temple on the Mount Gerizim, their own traditions. To a first century Jew, a Samaritan was a half-breed, a heretic. But here's where it lands hard. The hostility wasn't ancient in Jesus' time. It wasn't ancient to his audience. It was current. It was alive. It was personal. There are accounts in Josephus of Samaritans massacring children, Jewish pilgrims on the road to Jerusalem around the same time, like the same period. In John 8, when the religious leaders want to insult Jesus as deeply as possible, what do they call him? They call him a Samaritan and a demon-possessed man in the same breath. That's who walks down the road in Jesus' story. Not a neutral, helpful stranger, the enemy. So Jesus isn't just telling a story about helping people in need. He's telling a story about the enemy. The person your culture told you to despise. The person you'd cross the street to avoid. The person whose very existence made your skin crawl. Stopping on a road so dangerous and doing what religious professionals wouldn't do. The Samaritan sees the man, has compassion, bandages his wounds, loads him on his own animal, and then takes him to an inn. He pays for his care out of his own pocket and tells the innkeeper, if it costs more, I'll cover it when I come back. Then Jesus looks at the lawyer and he asks, which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? And the lawyer can't even bring himself to say the word Samaritan. He says, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus says, go and do likewise. All right, so here's what I want you to sit with. The lawyer who asked, who is my neighbor? Trying to find the boundary of his obligation. Jesus answered by making the neighbor the enemy. That's not an accident. That's not incidental to the story. That's the entire point. Jesus doesn't just expand the definition of neighbor to include strangers or foreigners or people on the margins. He specifically, deliberately, provocatively makes the hero of the story the person his audience hated the most. And then he says, go and do likewise. Not go and feel compassion for people like the Samaritan. Go and be the Samaritan. Go and be the one who crosses the boundary, who stops on the dangerous road, who puts the person everyone else stepped over onto your own animal, who spends your own money, who comes back to check. Now, here's the prophetic edge that we need to name. We have built a Christianity in this country that is very good at charity from a distance. We'll drop off canned goods, we'll write a check, we'll share a post, we'll even show up to a protest. And none of that is bad. But the Samaritan didn't manage the wounded man's situation from a safe distance. He touched him. He got the blood on his own hands. He disrupted his own journey. He spent his own resources. He made himself late and vulnerable on a road that was already very dangerous. The story is not about good feelings towards people in need. It's about costly proximity. And the people who walked past, the priest, the Levite, they weren't bad people. They were busy people, religious people, people with obligations and schedules and theological reasons for the choices that they made. Sound familiar? The question Jesus is asking isn't, do you feel bad for people who are suffering? The question is, are you willing to be inconvenienced by them? So I want to connect this back to where we've been because it matters. Episode 1, the kingdom of God is an alternative community. A different way of organizing life, not built on power and not built on accumulation, but love and service and the inversion of the world's values. Episode 2, that kingdom has something to say about systems that protect the power and crush the vulnerable. Your hunger for justice is blessed. It's aligned with what God is doing. Episode 3, peacemaking means refusing to be sorted by the machine. insisting on the humanity of people on every side of every line. Episode 4, right now. And now, this is where it gets skin and bones. That peacemaking, that refusal to be sorted, that insistence on seeing the human being behind the label. It has to become costly proximity. It has to get off the internet and onto the road. Because here's the thing about the Samaritan that I think most of us miss. He didn't stop and ask the wounded man who he voted for. He didn't check his theology before he bandaged his wounds. He didn't make sure the man would have been kind to other Samaritans before he put him on his own animal. He just saw a human being, and he had compassion. That's the kingdom. That's the whole thing right there. All right, so I'm going to try to land the plane now, because I know that some of you are hearing this and you're feeling overwhelmed. Like, I can barely keep my own life together. I've got bills and kids and a job that I'm already exhausted. How am I supposed to be the Samaritan? I want to be honest with you. I feel that too. I don't think Jesus is telling this story to crush us with obligation. I don't think that's the point. I don't think the point is to have you fix everything and help everyone and never say no. I think the point is smaller and harder than that. It's about the person right in front of you, right now. The one you've been stepping around. The one whose situation is inconvenient. The one your culture, your tribe, your algorithm told you isn't your problem. That person is your neighbor. Not as a category, as a human being with wounds that need bandaging. And here's the most pastoral thing that I could probably leave you with. The lawyer wanted a boundary. He wanted to know where his obligation ended. And Jesus refused to give him one. But he also didn't give him an impossible standard. He just gave him a story about one person, one road, one act of compassion. You don't have to save the whole world today. You just have to see who's on your road. And then, this is the hard part. You have to decide whether you're going to cross to the other side or you're going to stop. That decision made over and over again in small moments of ordinary life that's what it looks like to live in the kingdom. That's episode 4. I'm Cody. This is Friendly Fire. Blessed are the curious. If you landed here today and this spoke to you, go back and listen to episode 1 through 3, especially if you haven't. And I'll see you next time. That's it.